Hey guys, Dalek44 here. I need no introduction, but I got one anyway. We all love Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends, don't we? There is no doubt that Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends was one of the best children's TV shows of its time, running from 1984 to 2021 with 24 seasons, a theatrical movie and several specials. It was a show that was ahead of its time and ended too soon. But if it was still on today, then I'm sure it would continue to inspire the imagination of many railway lovers. Oh shit, I forgot they rebooted it. Yes, like most people, I wish the franchise would just end already so that we could talk about what a great impact it had on our childhoods as opposed to continuously talking about how Mattel are pissing on Wilbert Awdry's grave. It's no secret that the franchise is merely a shadow of its former self these days. Despite the quality of the franchise dropping in recent years, we all still look back to when the series was good. Most of the stories were well written, the messages weren't in your faces, and it had a colourful cast of memorable characters that we all still remember to this day. But I'm not here to talk about the TV series today. I'm here to talk about the series that started it all. The Railway series. The Railway series is a series of British books about a railway known as the North Western Railway, located on the fictional island of Sodor. There are 42 books in the series, first published in May 1945 by the Reverend Wilbert Awdry. Wilbert wrote 26 books, and the final one being written in October 1972. His son, Christopher, wrote 16 more between September 1983 and July 2011. The series features many anthropomorphic vehicles, including Thomas the Tank Engine himself. Nearly all Railway series stories were based on real-life events. As a lifelong railway enthusiast, Awdry was keen that his stories should be as realistic as possible. The engine characters were mostly based upon real classes of locomotives, and some of the railways themselves were based on real lines in the British Isles. But how did this series of books become the well-known franchise that we all know and love today? Let's take a look at the history of the Railway series. The story of the Railway series began in 1942, when Christopher Awdry at the age of 2 had measles and was confined to a darkened room. His father told him stories and rhymes to cheer him up. The first story that Wilbert ever wrote was Edward's Day Out, featuring Edward the Blue Engine, an old engine who was allowed out of the sheds for one day. The 3 stories that followed featured 2 other engines, Gordon the Big Engine and Henry the Green Engine. The story also introduced us to the Fat Director, the man in charge of the Sodor Railway. The 4 stories were published by Edmund Ward in 1945 as a single volume, The 3 Railway Engines. What started off as a reverend telling his sick son train stories turned into a worldwide phenomenon. That's pretty impressive. Christmas 1942 saw the genesis of a character that grew to become the most famous fictional locomotive in the world. Awdry constructed a toy tank engine for Christopher, which gained the name Thomas. Stories about Thomas were requested by Christopher, and in 1946 saw the publication of Thomas the Tank Engine. Like its predecessor, this book was a success, and Awdry was asked to write stories about James, a character who first appeared in Thomas and the Breakdown Train, the final story in Thomas the Tank Engine. The book James the Red Engine appeared in 1948, the year in which the railways in Britain were nationalised, and from this point onwards, the Fat Director was known by his familiar title of the Fat Controller. And from then onwards, many more books were published, and many more characters were introduced to the world of Sodor, including Percy the Small Engine, Toby the Tram Engine, the narrow gauge engines on the Skarloey Railway, and so on and so forth. Every story based on the Skarloey Railway was all influenced by real-life events that occurred on the Dalek44 Railway in Wales. Wilbert chose the Dalek44 Railway in particular because he used to volunteer for that railway. And as we all know, one hilarious event led to him writing the story Peter, Sam and the Refreshment Lady, where he was volunteering as the train's guard and accidentally left the driver's mother-in-law on the platform. To this day I still find it amazing how something that Wilbert Awdry himself did inspired one of his stories. As the Railway series went on, the stories matured along with its readers. And that's very rare for a children's book series. When modernisation on British railways came and diesels were introduced to the railways, Wilbert Awdry decided to put that into his books, thus introducing Devious Diesel, the well-known villain of the Railway series and the TV series that we all come to love. And from that point onwards, diesels became a mainstay for the Railway series, introducing some diesel characters that were bad, some diesel characters that were good, and some that were somewhere in the middle. But with this style of writing also came the introduction of scrap on the railways. Since in real life in the 1960s, steam engines were being retired from steam, scrapped and then cut up. So Wilbert touched upon this in the book Stepney the Bluebell Engine, which sees the real-life locomotive Stepney visiting the island of Sodor, and Percy telling the story of how steam engines are all being cut up on British railways, and how many steam engines have managed to escape the cutter's torch thanks to the work of preservationists like the Bluebell Railway. The later book, Enterprise and Engines, also saw the introduction of Flying Scotsman, the last surviving member of its class, who was also introduced as Gordon's twin brother, since steam was abolished and Flying Scotsman was the only one of its class left by then. To write books and articles about the abolishment of steam and when steam engines were being cut up and scrapped is one thing, but to include it in a series of children's books was another thing. And that's highly praised these days. It's as if the Railway series itself was growing up alongside the children the stories were originally being read to, especially with Oliver the Great Western Engine's storyline within the same book, where Oliver and his brake van Toad are escaping from scrap, and with the help of Douglas make their way to Sodor, where they're mended and repainted and are now working alongside Duck the Great Western Engine on his branch line. And it made sense for Wilbert Awdry to go in this direction, since at the time those books were being written, diesels were becoming a new thing on British railways and posed a threat to steam engines. It's not very often that a book series written for children would mature along with its audiences, but Wilbert Awdry did it really well with his style of writing. Awdry continued working on the Railway series until 1972, when Tramway Engines, the 26th book in the series, was published. However, he had been finding it increasingly difficult to come up with ideas for new stories. After this, he felt that the well had run dry, and so decided that the time had come to retire. In 1952, a person named Robert Mitchell, who had just heard about the Railway series books on the radio, wrote a letter to Frida Lindstrom, who was in charge of the BBC's children's television department, asking if they could adapt Wilbert Awdry's books for a television series. She approached Eric Marriott, the editor of the Railway series, to get the rights to adapt 2 stories from the 3 Railway Engines for TV. The deal was made, and on the 14th of June 1953, The Sad Story of Henry was adapted and broadcast on BBC children's television, with Julia Lang as the narrator for this adaptation, making her the first narrator in the franchise. But during the broadcast, the model depicting Henry derailed since the points weren't set right, and one of the crewmakers had to put him back on the tracks. But they couldn't redo it because this was during the days when they were filming everything live, which made this episode a disaster, which made Wilbert very hesitant to adapt the show for a TV series again in the future. As far as we know, this old pilot episode has been lost to time, with only pictures like this one of James's model remaining. Andrew Lloyd Webber wanted to produce a musical television series based on the Railway series, but Wilbert Awdry refused to give him control he wanted. Lloyd Webber would go on to compose the 1984 musical Starlight Express and create the Really Useful Club, a name inspired by the catchphrase Really Useful Engine. While these attempts to adapt the books into a TV series didn't meet very well with critics and audiences, it wasn't until the 1980s when a woman named Britt Allcroft stepped in. Decades later, Britt Allcroft and David Mitton came towards Wilbert Awdry for the idea of adapting the show to a TV series again. The plan was given the thumbs up, and Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends premiered in 1984 and concluded in 2021, with several narrators including Sir Ringo Starr, Michael Angelis, George Carlin, Alec Baldwin, Michael Brandon, Pierce Brosnan, Mark Morgan, John Hassler and Joseph May. And the rest, as they say, is history. During the production of the first series, Christopher Awdry, like his father, was a keen railway enthusiast and started to write his own stories for the Railway series, starting with Triple Header, based on a railwayman's account of a locomotive running out of steam short of its destination. In the story, Thomas, Percy and Duck take on the Wild Nor'Wester, but find it more than they can handle. Christopher wrote 3 further stories for the book, Stop Thief, Mind That Bike and Fish, and showed them to his father, who encouraged Christopher to submit them in for publication. So began Christopher's run in the Railway series books. Christopher wrote another 13 books, including the 50th anniversary volume, Thomas and the Fat Controller's Engines. He also wrote stories for the TV series, notably more about Thomas the Tank Engine, the Railway series' 30th volume. While Christopher's stories weren't exactly on par with his father's stories, there's still a lot to be admired for his style of writing. He kept it consistent with the Railway series before, and he kept it consistent with the times it was being written in. The success of the television series led to tensions between Christopher and the publishers. Thomas was the central character of the TV series, and the publishers wanted stories focused on Thomas. Christopher produced Thomas and the Fat Controller's Engines that had one story about Thomas, while Thomas Comes Home did not feature Thomas until the last page. In July 2011, they released the 42nd book in the series, Thomas and His Friends. The final story ended with the words, "The End." While not a superb final book compared to Wilbert Awdry's final book, Christopher Awdry made sure that the Railway series would go out in style. Christopher Awdry said that he had other material, which he'd hoped would be published. He narrated some news stories about the narrow gauge engines on Duncan days at the Dalek Railway in Wales, and this would bring the Railway series to an end. But that wouldn't be the end of the legacy of the books. While the TV series concluded in 2021 with 24 series, a big screen feature film, various specials, and a god-awful animated reboot that aired sometime after the original series ended, the legacy of the Railway series lived on in the fans and preserved railways. One of the most famous being the Dalek Railway in Wales, which often holds annual Awdry extravaganzas where the characters were being set up to look like the characters from the books, and their crews would have them running around the railway and stopping in various places on the railway so people could take pictures and film videos, recreating various iconic scenes from the books. This is a very fun way to celebrate Awdry's legacy. Before the TV series came to be, the Railway series stories had many people narrating it. Wilbert Awdry himself narrated Edward's Day Out and Edward and Gordon for a vinyl record released in 1957. John Morris narrated the 3 railway engines through to Percy the Small Engine from 1961 to 1966. After John Morris left, famous actor Willie Rushton, who you may remember as the voices for pretty much every character in the Trapdoor, stepped in to narrate with the remaining books. He narrated Edward the Blue Engine through tramway engines from 1979 to 1984. Between 1981 and 1982, John Gullard narrated books 1 to 12 of the Railway series for the Noel Edmonds Show on BBC Radio 1. During 1994 and 1995, Ted Robbins took up the role as narrator for the Railway series audiobooks. He narrated the books written by Christopher Awdry, from Really Useful Engines to Wilbert the Forest Engine. From 2006 to 2011, the late Michael Angelis re-narrated the Railway series stories originally narrated by Morris and Rushton for CDs released by BBC Audio. He is best known as the longest running narrator for the Thomas the Tank Engine TV series from the 3rd series to the 16th series, totaling 21 years. I find it really sweet that Michael Angelis returned to narrate some stories from the Railway series. And Wilbert Awdry himself will be remembered as one of the greatest children's story writers of all time, having a steam locomotive at the Dean Forest Railway be named after him in his honour, the Dalek Railway celebrating his life and work at their railway. Hell, even a Class 91 diesel locomotive got named after him. That just shows what great legacy the guy has left on railway enthusiasts and children around the world. During many milestones of the Railway series, many contributions have been made, including the 39th book in the Railway series, Thomas and the Fat Controller's Engines, for the 50th anniversary, the TV special Calling All Engines released for the 60th anniversary, but we don't talk about that. 2 TV series specials for the 70th anniversary, those being The Adventure Begins, a retelling of the original stories from the Railway series and the first series of the TV series, and Sodor's Legend of the Lost Treasure, introducing brand new characters and introducing Railway series characters for the first time since Series 4. The 75th anniversary of the Railway series saw the release of the final TV series story, The Royal Engine, which brought everything to a satisfying close for the TV series. And many contributions are being made to the 80th anniversary of this year, including the Thomas & Friends online auction at Prop Store Auction, auctioning off over 200 lots from the beloved TV show, models, props, you name it. Various Day Out with Thomas events at British Heritage Railways, the 5th Awdry extravaganza at the Dalek Railway, as well as a Railway series weekend going on at the same railway, and various merchandises from various companies. Some not so great, including Mattel's current merchandise, and this Bachmann Thomas Railway series set, which is just reusing the original Thomas model with no changes to it whatsoever. Although I do admit those 2 80th anniversary Bachmann retro fans that are coming out at some point this year do look pretty cool, and I might be tempted to get them both when they come out. But the best merchandise I've seen for the 80th anniversary so far is the Play Rail Railway series Thomas the Tank Engine set, which I currently have. Not to mention the fact that Thomas characters have been included in Train Sim World 5 this year. And very recently, Ian McHugh, producer for the TV series, found the old footage reel of the Down the Mine pilot from 1983. He and his team worked really hard to restore the footage and upload it to the official Thomas the Tank Engine YouTube channel, which has gained over 100,000 views by the time of this video's recording. It's just amazing how much has been contributed to the Railway series' 80th anniversary for this year. Us Thomas fans have been getting really lucky with Thomas content and merchandise. It really shows how much love there is for this franchise despite the fact that it's gone downhill in the recent years. Despite the fact that the franchise has gone downhill in the most recent years and may never recover, the fans are still keeping the memories of the classic TV series as well as the book series it was based on alive. And that's something special. In conclusion, the Railway series is one of the best children's book series ever written. The stories were well crafted, the characters were all memorable, the morals weren't in your face, and it has a heavy focus on railway realism, something that a lot of children's material these days could take some inspiration from. They can reboot the franchise as many times as they like and make it as far away from the original roots as possible, but they will never come close to capturing the same charm of Wilbert Awdry and Christopher Awdry's writing, as well as Britt Allcroft and David Mitton's directing. Even if the franchise never comes back uphill at this point, everyone will still love the original Railway series and the classic TV series, for all the reasons that I have just listed. It's a franchise that's well worth remembering and worth looking back on when you're in the mood for nostalgia. And until next time, this is Dalek44 saying, Happy 80th Anniversary Railway series. May the memory of it go on for many years to come.
Railway background, and quite naturally the interest transferred itself to my son, and when he was ill with measles at the age of 3, it was most natural for me to tell him stories about trains. And he said, "Daddy, what are the engines' names?" And I invented names on the spur of the moment: Edward, Gordon, Henry, and so on. There was Edward's Day Out, Henry in the Tunnel, and then there was another story based on the story I'd read in the magazine about a Highland Railway banker being left behind. This was the story of how Gordon got stuck on the hill and had to be rescued by Edward, the engine whom he despised, banking him in the rear. But once Edward had started him off, Gordon was able to go on fast, and poor Edward ran out of steam and got left behind. And so there it was. And the first book, 3 Railway Engines, was published in 1945.